Hi, I'm Eric, and I'm a social studies educator, historian, and host of this, the Everything is a Primary Source podcast. I'm also an avid collector of popular culture artifacts. I love what I find at thrift store outlets, garage sale leftovers, and what I spot just making my way around the built world. I enjoy sorting through boxes of free books and magazines, not to mention online collections like Internet Archive, and of course the Library of Congress. But you don't need to spend your time digging through bins or following online rabbit holes to get a look into the past. The movies and TV we watch, the books we read, and the games we play are all documents of the past. So is fashion, food, music, toys, even the roads we travel on and the places we live and work in. Everything is a primary source. This podcast is the result of exhibiting these kinds of artifacts in public, getting passersby to select an item they connect with, and then chatting with me to see what it says about the time, place, and people who made it. The conversation you are about to hear, therefore, is your history, my history, our history, through popular culture. I am here with Marilyn, and we are at the Association for Experiential Education Northeastern Conference in Durham, New Hampshire, at UNH. And you came here from not terribly far away, right? Connecticut?
Yeah, Hartford area.
Okay. And have you been to this conference before?
Not in Durham, but because it changes location every year. But over the last 35 years, yeah, several.
And it's, I'm sure it's a lot of similar type organizations meet because it's an opportunity for you to share ideas in less traditional styles of education. Is that right?
Absolutely.
What do you represent, or what kind of what's the organization that you're with, or how do you carry out your teaching?
So I wear many hats, but today I'm here with Experiential Systems, Inc., and I'm a trainer of folks who work on challenge courses and use the challenge course as a modality for exploring group and team and community and themselves.
There's so many things that students and teachers learn from those kinds of activities, and I think that it's not uncommon. I was telling you before we hit record, it's not uncommon for traditional schools to have breakaway, they'll do a field trip or they'll do some kind of outing to a location like that. And very rarely does that experience not change the students in some way, right? My wife just coordinated a trip, and she was on the trip to a facility north of here that does exactly that. And she said there was some students that had the biggest smiles on their faces, that it was like they unlocked something, that this is the kind of education they've been longing for years. Do you see that on a regular basis too? It's just kind of like these moments of clarity almost?
That's why I keep doing it. So it's having the privilege of sharing that experience with young and it doesn't matter the age, it doesn't matter what reason they're coming out, whether they're coming with a school group or whether they're, doing a professional development from a corporation or a nonprofit, and being able to provide an opportunity for people to have that glow, that moment, that just life enrichment. That's what I do, and I love it. I mean, you kind of, every day I go, geez, maybe I shouldn't say this on tape, but I get paid to do that.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, you want to pay me to do that?
Isn't
All
that
right.
what 95% of the workforce wants to find in their life, is being paid to do something they love? And
something they love, and I just keep doing it because I love it. I've done other things. I wear many hats, as most of us who work in this industry do. It's just those moments are what keep me coming back. Why I'll do programs in the rain and the snow and the mud and the mosquitoes, and it's just to have one of those moments, to be there for somebody else's somebody else's experience like that. I'm getting weepy-eyed.
No, well, it's and I think it's warranted. There's plenty of times when, as educators, we feel those moments where we are watching the enrichment actually taking place.
Yeah,
and knowing that. The most I've ever really done as a social studies teacher is field trips to historic sites and museums. But even then, you can see the things that are affecting their life. So that's a good segue.
I'm here enthusiastically nodding. I know you can't capture that on a podcast,
right.
but my head's been nodding up and down and nodding up and down.
So you spotted, actually, last night, after I set up this table, that I have a game of life from, and this particular version of it is from 1977. So I don't know how much alteration, how many changes took place from the initial version, the earliest versions of this game, to later. But you were commenting that you were playing this with your granddaughter.
Both of them, yes.
2 granddaughters, and they're separated by more than a few years, right? So they're perception of this game was probably remarkably different. Do you mind sharing or resharing the way that they interacted with the game of life?
Sure. So my 3-year-old grandchild just wanted to drive the car around. She wanted me to pick a car and drive it. And the 15-year-old wanted to play. And our family's not... we don't spend any time on gender roles. We all cook, we all clean, we all work, we all fix the cars. We all, there's no particular gender role assignment. And I was just shocked that when I was playing, my 3-year-old granddaughter had me driving around. She said I had to have a person in the car. And I thought maybe that's because she figured, cars are driven by people, and she was making that connection. And I wasn't even paying attention. I just grabbed a peg. And I put it in, and the peg happened to be blue. And I was thoughtless. I wasn't trying to make any political statements or anything. And she just had a fit, and she pulled the peg out, and she said, no, it has to be pink. And because you're a girl, it has to be pink. And I was like, oh, my gosh, how'd that happen? That my 3-year-old, who actually only has done 2 days a week of preschool, even most recently, like, how did she get that, And the 15-year-old was interested in how you have to stop and be married on the game, and that I should get married. And I was like, well, why? I
so
see it's a rule.
Early in the game, too. It's
so early in the game. And we had big discussions about, the trajectory of careers and how much money you made in, if you went to university versus business, or, I just was... I hadn't looked at the game in depth like that for a long time. And it was striking, that it was like, I see what we're promoting here. And
well, I'm actually glad to hear that what I was hoping to do with this was actually happening when I wasn't even here. That we're looking at these, in this case, an almost 50-year-old version of life. It's static. It's held in place. It's showing you what the idealized life was in 1977. Whether or not people actually lived exactly as this board is showing is debatable. But it shows that very much this is held in place as some kind of artifact of the late 1970s and what was the social expectations there. And I think about when you were saying about your 3-year-old granddaughter and her deciding of the blue versus the pink. I mean, first of all, both of the pegs are like baby color versions. It's not like, so they always look like stick babies that are driving the cars, not really an adult or anything. And when you do have children in the game, you can pack them into these cars. There's like 6 spots it's like a minivan basically. And, they are the exact same size as the adults. It's, they just for cost purposes, I'm sure they did that. But I think about the toy aisle because I have a son and we go, we look at toys a lot. And when I was growing up in the 1980s, I remember very distinct aisles. It was like this aisle was the boy toys, and it was mostly darker color, packaging and, for the boys' toys. And then the pink aisle was the girls' toys. That's where you'd find Barbie and My Little Pony and Rainbow Bright and all the girls' toys. I've recognized in the last couple of years, especially, because there was a time when I didn't go to toy aisles at all because I didn't have a kid and so forth. But now that I do have a kid and he's 9 years old, so we've been looking at toy aisles for a while. I've noticed that those have become a lot less emphasized. That you do still see aisles that are predominantly girls-centric toys, but there's a lot more aisles that are just blended. It's toys that can be enjoyed by anybody. And then the section where you'd find life would be non-gender specific in any time period, just the board games, and were there board games that were geared more towards boys and girls? Absolutely. But this one, just on the packaging, we can see that it's a family of 2 females and 2 males playing this game together. And the dad looks kind of like, yep, that's life.
Very Brady Bunch.
It does.
This looks like Marcia, and that looks like, they're doing the Brady Bunch.
So I think the question from the list that I have, that I think we're already tapping into, is what behavior and ideas is this conveying? And you made the comment about the paydays that you see. How frequently will somebody be, it seems like in some cases there's only like 2 spaces between paydays, 2 or 3. And so it's what does that report out about 1977 life for most people?
Well, I think there was regularity. I think there was an idea that, you worked at some particular job and it provided a regular source of income, and definitely not what we experience at the Association for Experiential Ed, where our paydays might be more frequent or far less frequent depending on what we're doing. I just did want to backtrack and tell you those are station wagons and not minivans.
Yeah, they didn't have minivans back then.
Yeah, I know. When you said minivans, I was like, oh no, these are station wagons. And I loved our Gran Torino.
And those were also products of the way families looked and the way life looked in 1977, where, regularity and uniformity, maybe not to the extreme of the early post-war period of Levitt towns and suburbia, but suburbs were still growing in the 70s. And if anything, they were becoming much more normalized, the suburban life. And you would see a lot of station wagons. You would see a lot of trips to the store. And in this particular version, there's 2 paths. And that's pretty standard for all life. When you start, you can decide to go to college or do you want to go directly into the workforce. But it doesn't take long before they reconvene at a single line for the rest of the game. And a few other points in the game board, you can make some choices in the path that you go. But for the most part, it seems like regardless if you have a college degree or you went directly into the trades, you are still earning, like you said, that regular paycheck, that you are not, it was a lot less common for people to be contracting or doing self-employment as you would see in the 21st century, thanks in large part to the internet. So are there any of these landing spots that you think are, you already mentioned the marriage one, do you see any of the other spots on the board that seem uniquely 70s in style? Is there any of the
yes,
go to the discotheque?
Or... And that you, as we were talking prior to recording, the idea that if you land on a child, you spin, and that it tells you you can pick a boy or a girl, and then it tells you sort of how much money people are going to give you, which I think is hilarious because it really should be contemporized to you should just hand all your money to the bank. So. Yes, the fact that children are built in, they're not built in really optionally. They're if you land on a space, you have a child. And that's remarkable. The regularity of paydays and the mandatory having children and the spinning to get married, it's very, very much pushing a particular cultural point of view, clearly.
Yeah, which is funny because the reality was in the 70s, that cultural point of view was being, in a large way, rejected. That if you look at birth rates in the 70s compared to previous time periods, there was, I wouldn't say it was necessarily a baby bust, but there was a lot fewer children being born in the late 60s, early 70s than obviously after World War II. And I think that that's usually credited to women making those kinds of decisions that you're describing of, do I even want children? Maybe I'd rather focus on my career. The career woman was something that was emerging in the 70s, not just a working woman, but somebody who was a doctor or a lawyer, somebody who is a profession. And in many cases, I talk about this with my students, I mean, there's a few reasons why a woman would work. One of them is to help put food on the table at home, earn that paycheck because the family needs it. Another reason might be they're a single mom and they have to go to work to care for their family. And a third reason is maybe they just want to. Maybe they don't want to be at home raising children or keeping a house. They want to see what their career and their intellect and their abilities can take them in the professional money-making world. And so it's interesting because we know in retrospect and from plenty of experiences that the 70s was not leading that idealized 1950s style, but this game seems to be promoting a more traditional style of life, doesn't it?
Sure. I think it's trying to put the brakes on some of that, because I think the 70s happened on top of the fact that, you know, businesses realized if you could get women working, then a household could buy more stuff. And so there was this plus to women working, but then the counterculture was if women work, then we move away from that traditional, you know, mom in the household, which it also means that we kind of go back to where society, culture, maybe patriarchal culture can also have more control over women. So you have to get married, you have to have a baby. And of course, having children, if that's your sole responsibility, takes up a lot of time that you might use for any other personal endeavor. But I thought it was interesting that at the same time, women being educated was being promoted. So women going to university. So what were you supposed to go to university and get connected to lots of things that were outside of your previous life experience and then not use them because you were going to, read poetry in the kitchen? I don't know. So it was a lot of turmoil for women trying to make choices about, do I become a fully realized human being, or am I a thing in the kitchen, in the family, and not diminishing. I have children myself and grandchildren, love them dearly, not diminishing the role of caretaking and rearing children. But, you know, seeing an option and then being told you can't take it, or the other societal push again of getting women into the work world and creating a daycare industry and a you know, preschool industry. And I mean, preschool is an industry. That this kind of a game shows sort of the cultural pullback, like, whoa, hold on, you know.
We liked the way things were in the 50s and early 60s.
We want the car, yes, but we want to make sure that if dad's in it, mom's next to them. And I mean, I just love the compulsory marriage aspect of life.
It's a very like, 70s looking couple too. I think the guy even has big sideburns and you know,
it's
mustache.
Hilarious.
If only he had a powder blue suit, then that'd be even better.
If you could see the depictions here, I love the poorhouse is, you know, a very nice two-story colonial. At the end of the game, if you go bankrupt, all you get is this two-story colonial, whereas, you know, you become, quote, a millionaire at the end of the game if you pass a certain threshold of financial success, and you get was what then would have been considered a palace, this little depiction. But I just thought it's hilarious that bankruptcy leads to nothing but a mere 2-story colonial.
Oh, well, not bad.
Yeah.
I think the last thing we can touch on right now, and maybe I'm skipping over into the where, locations associated with it, is that this is kind of universally applied. It's not regional, but as we approach the end of the 70s, that's the same time period of the Equal Rights Amendment being brought up, and you see regionalism rear its head again, where still in the Southeast, you might have a different attitude of what a woman's role in the household is versus the Northeast, or the West, particularly the space between the Missouri River and California, the Great Plains, had by that point about 100-year-old history of women not having gender assignment roles, that it was everybody was pitching in around the house. And that's why in places like Wyoming was the first state to have women's suffrage protected, and that was 1870s, because there's that recognition of, well, women are part of the household too. They have their own independent, they are a person as well, believe it or not, right?
Yeah,
and
sure.
so, but even 100 years out, this game seems to, it just kind of gives a romanticized version of American life. It doesn't stick it into one particular part of the country, but the reality is that the same life wasn't exactly being lived, even as recent as the 1970s, that regionalism still did exist to a certain point in informing the way people behaved. So,
but I think the idea was to sort of present this concept, and maybe it's hard for the generation that has had so much more in terms of things to do and games and, Fortnite or whatever.
Yeah.
The idea that, like, this was it. We had the games you have on your table here. Like, this is what we did as a family.
Right.
Or you watched what your parents watched on television, because we would never have dreamt of sitting down and grabbing the remote and changing what they were watching.
Or having your own TV in another part of the house.
Where,
Yeah.
we had one. And I'm old enough to know when ours turned from black and white to color. I'm not idealizing those days. I'm just saying that I don't know whether today you can understand the impact of this kind of a game, because this was what we had to play. So it didn't matter where you were living in the United States. It didn't matter what your life experience was. This was the game we played. And it had a really specific point of view. Mm-hmm. And so whether you were intentional about analyzing the point of view or not, which none of us were,
right.
You were really being shown a point of view and consistently playing. We would play this a couple times a week, So you would be exposed to this point of view over and over again, and it became the idea of what the American family should be.
Yeah.
Like that, this was an aspirational game. Milton Bradley, I always found it funny that the business track, the max you could make was $6,000. And then if you go to university, there's all these careers you can get in that make far more. And, that was promoting a particular point of view. So it's really hard to overstate the impact this would have had. There was nothing else to dilute it.
Right.
We didn't have any other game to dilute this point of view.
And
so this was it. This was the point of view,
Because Monopoly, I don't know if it was happening in the 70s or not, but Monopoly has been regionalized. Like you can find, and sometimes they're knockoffs. They're not Parker Brothers official Monopoly boards, but you can. I found one. I didn't bring it today, but I have one at home that's was marketed to Great Britain, and so they don't have any of the same locations on it because they're not in Atlantic City, New Jersey. So they, why would they have it? But I've seen it happen many times before, where it'd be like a local version of Monopoly. But unlike the game of life, Monopoly is all about what you decide to do at any given point in the game. Some things happen to you. You don't have control over them. There's the chance cards, and you might end up landing on a spot that says go to jail. But you do have a lot more choice in as far as what you do, whereas the game of life, there's fewer choices, And whichever choice you take, there's still the same pattern of, things that you just have to have happen to you. So when you arrive at the very end, it's really not anything that you did or didn't do throughout the game that will decide if you win. It's just how lucky you were spinning. And maybe that's what life is, actually, we all find out this is just some elaborate life game. So, but thank you so much for taking the time to talk about this. And
I'm glad to see the game. I could show you ours. It's identical. This is what I currently still play. We have a new game, but
I recognize the board, all the pieces. The one I grew up playing, I'm sure it came out later than this one did, but the contours, the directions on the board, those little green plastic hills, identical to what I had.
Yeah.
But and I always got a kick out of the factory thing over there, the plant.
Exactly.
It's very mid-century. You can just see it. In the end, like the end of an episode of a TV show, and brought to you by DuPont Chemicals.
Exactly. I was gonna say that looks like the Connecticut Natural Gas building myself.
And giving a pledge of allegiance to the end of the episode, just to that building. But thank you so much for doing this, and this place cleared out. But
I love all the other memorabilia you have here as well.
Well, I have it. I might as well do something with it, and so I think this is as good a use as any, is to get people talking about it and what it can tell us about the past. So thank you for
the opportunity. It was fun.
Popular culture, by definition, connects and unites us, and proves that people of different backgrounds, in fact, have a lot in common with one another. I hope you enjoyed this conversation, at least in part, for that reason. If it connects with you and you'd like to add to it, or any of the podcast episodes, just visit everything-history.com and search for the Everything as a Primary Source project, which can be found in the classroom section of the website. We'd love to hear what you have to say. Be sure to rate and share this podcast wherever you are listening to it now, and follow Everything as a Primary Source on social media, including YouTube and especially Instagram. Thank you for listening to the EPS podcast, where everything is a primary source.